Welcome, everybody, to Make It Make Sense. I am Erika Washington, the Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada, and your favorite host of MIMS, Make It Make Sense. It is now the end of 2022. As recording, this is the end of November. We have just had our midterm elections. This is also the last episode of MIMS for 2022. Of course, we'll be back sometime next year. Not sure of the actual date yet, but we have a legislative session coming up and just so many things that we're going to be working on. So I want to make sure you're all aware and involved in all things Nevada, all things United States, all things foreign policy. We're gonna dive deep into all of it. But first, midterms. We've been talking about it all year long. The whole season was the midterms, right? Because midterms are so important. And notoriously, less people vote in the midterms than they do in a presidential election. However, this year it feels like the turnout was really, really strong. So thank you to everyone who cast a ballot, whether in person or by mail. We know that it is really important that we all stay involved. And this election was super, super close. So I'm really excited today for the conversations we're going to have. It's been sort of a logistical Olympics trying to get all the folks that I wanted on to talk about the midterms this year. So we have some folks that we're going to be talking to together. And then I got a little special guest that we had to talk to ahead of time that the wonderful world of editing has added in for today's show. So again, let's see, do I have any housekeeping things first? Yes, Black Census. We always talk about the Black Census. It is just now over for the most part, but the link is still live for the Black Census, so you can still take it. We still want to hear your Black voice. We still want to know about what your Black issues are and your Black joys are, and how you want to fix anything that's going on in your community. So please make sure, if you get an opportunity, pass the link along to your friends and family, anybody who identifies as being a part of the Black diaspora. Please take the Black Census. What else we got? Oh, Make It Work Nevada. We will be closed for Christmas and for Thanksgiving, the colonizing holiday that we will only really think about as the time for eating. But if you have any issues, if you have any stories you want to tell us, please get on our website, makeitworknevada.org. We're still looking for folks who can be ambassadors, who can be a part of the conversations, especially as we're going into our next legislative session. And there will be a lot of bills out there, and those bills may affect you. So we want to make sure you're in the loop and you know what's going on. You're getting our monthly newsletter. You're following us on Facebook, on Twitter, if it still exists by the time that you see this, and Instagram, and of course, TikTok. We've been doing a lot of fun stuff over on TikTok. So if you haven't seen us, please, please, please follow us on TikTok. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Let's go ahead and get this party started. I want to bring in my very special guests and good friends who've been doing this work across the country for many, many years. Welcome, y'all.
Hey, Erika.
Hey. All right, so let's tell the audience, who the heck are y'all?
Well, my name is Josie Kalipeni. I'm the Executive Director of Family Values at work, and I get to hang out with these two on a regular basis, which is some of the joy of my life and my work.
Hi everyone, I'm Leng Chancey. I'm Executive Director here at 9 to 5, and I am just so happy to be here with the both of you.
So I want to say, starting off, that we are friends. Like, these are people that I feel like I can go to and talk to about all of the things. So this conversation will be just that. These are some girlfriends talking about the election, talking about policy, talking about the good, the bad, and the really crazy. It's not an MSNBC interview,
Yes.
so we can be as relaxed as we want to be. And we just, because I think it's important. Like, this is how, people have conversations about what's going on. They're not, pre-planned
Yeah.
talking points. I didn't tell them anything about what I was going to ask them, and I don't know what they're going to say. So, which is the best way to do things, I think. So So, so I want to start off by asking y'all, and I'm gonna start with you, Josie, at first, actually, because not only was this an important election because it was a midterm, but also this was actually the first election that you were able to vote in. So, congratulations, new voter.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And so, tell me, what are your thoughts as a new voter? It's your first time around. How do you feel about it?
I was so excited about it. I should give a little background for folks listening in. I became a citizen on the same day as election on November 8th. So I literally got sworn in at 9 a.m., turned around, and in states like Maryland, you have same day registration, which I got to do. So I went and did same day registration and turned around and went to vote. And, I thought I would be really emotional at the swearing in part, both about having to give up my allegiance to my native country, but also just about how long of a journey it's been for me to get to my citizenship. But it wasn't that emotional for me. But when I walked into my polling location, I was really overcome with emotions about how monumental this level of responsibility is, not just because of the work that we all do, but because it really is that important to be able to put your faith and your hopes for the future into action in a way like voting. So I was really emotional walking in. All of the staff at the polling location heard that it was my first time voting, heard that I just become a citizen. So it was like a big celebration in there, which was so helpful because it's intimidating. And I wonder how many first time voters feel intimidated. I'm like, I do this work, but it's intimidating to walk in that room and to see all of the booths and to see all of the people there. And you have to show your ID and you're asked if you want a paper ballot or if you want to go into a booth. And, I didn't know how many questions to expect and, what of the process to really expect. So it was really, really intimidating. And at the same time, it was a necessary responsibility. So I think about all the first time voters and how intimidating it is, but also how brave of an act it is. I also think about all of the people that had to endure harassment and threat to their lives just to show up to a polling booth, and how monumental it is that I get to walk in those same shoes. And y'all better watch out for new immigrant voters because we are coming. One of the things I did before I left my oath location, I told everybody, I said, if you're in Maryland, you get same day registration. And I had a bunch of people come up to me and say, okay, what does that mean? And I ran down everything, ran down people's addresses to figure out where they should go. And in that location alone, I talked to 13 new voters on that day who didn't even know that Maryland has same day registration. So look out for new immigrant voters because, yes, we're coming.
I think that is so important. And it's sad that they didn't just make that information known for the folks who were, getting their citizenship that day or any time in the few days before, because I think a lot of people might think, oh, it's too late. I'm going to have to wait till 2024 in order to vote. And it wasn't the case. And then also the idea that you have to give up your allegiance to your country or whatever, that part still kind of boggles my mind with folks when they become American citizens. It's like, I can love more than one place. Like, I don't
exactly.
That's a whole other conversation, but I don't get it. Like, it's weird to me.
Yeah.
But
that's a whole other podcast.
That's right, exactly. But Leng, we talked a little bit before. You also are an immigrant voter to a certain extent. You have been an American citizen voting since, you said, Obama. Was it Obama's first term?
Yes, first term.
And so what was that experience like for you?
Back then my daughter was walking. I remember she was walking, but she could barely, she wasn't communicative yet, right? She was a tiny toddler and she's 17 now. So I remember Bennett was talking at that point, and he got into the car after I became a naturalized citizen, and he was so excited. He was waving the little flag that they gave you at the
That they give
ceremony, and he's like, "We're all Americans now." I remember that so vividly. Yeah, I agree with Josie. The first time walking into the voting location and at the polls was quite intimidating as a first time voter. I never got to vote in my own country growing up because I left the country when I was too young to vote. So it was only in my adult life when I became a naturalized citizen was the first time I ever voted. So it was quite an experience the first time, and I remember casting my vote for the presidential election that year.
I
Wow.
think I think it's really
Mhm.
important also to highlight that sometimes when the conversation is around immigrants or new American majority voting or what have you, these are not the faces that I see. And so, but there are a lot of
Mm,
folks who are immigrants coming from a wide variety of places here in the United States who have different sets of issues when it comes to immigration.
Mhm.
Everything isn't
yes.
about trying to cross the border from the south. There are a lot of issues with that, and we are strong supporters of making sure that we have immigration policies that are inclusive and help people get to where they're trying to get to, and into safety away from whatever is happening. But also there are folks who are not necessarily coming because it isn't safe where they are, but it's just because
Mhm.
they're coming for other reasons to this country, but still come up against so many hurdles and what have you. And so, immigration is always at the, a top talking point during any election. Someone's always talking about it,
Yeah.
but not
Yep.
necessarily maybe talking about the things that matter to you when it comes to
Yep.
immigration. So when you looked at
Yes.
this election that just passed and the folks that were running, I'm assuming that there's some sort of lens there that you're looking through as an immigrant and as a resident of whatever state you're in, and how that stuff affects you. So I said a lot to say, how do you feel about the outcome of the election in your state? Leng, you're in Georgia, which is always on the news, and everyone wants to know what's going on in Georgia. So, how do you feel, as a
Yeah.
woman, as a, as an immigrant, as a mom, as a leader of an organization that fights for policies for women, working women, and what have you? How do you feel about the outcome?
Well, we have some high points, but a lot of low points, as you can only imagine the national conversation about Georgia. But before I get to that, I just have
Mm,
to say that, I think, Erica, what you talked earlier about, immigrant rights, immigrant policies, and the face of who is coming to this country. I mean, my family story is my sister is still part of the visa backlog problem,
mm,
right? We applied for her green card status to come to this country to be reunited with me for, I think now we've been in the system for over 15 years. And we have no idea if she's ever going to
yeah.
get her green card to be able to come
Yeah.
and live here with me, right? So, I don't get to see her very often.
Mm,
Often as in like years, especially since the pandemic. I don't get to see my parents very often, and so it's like families continue to be separated. And for myself, I'm privileged, all right? I can buy a ticket whenever I can afford it and go see my family. But for many families that are in the immigration system, they are separated for life.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
as we're voting, we're just not only casting our own votes, but we're also casting votes that impact so many families that we don't even know,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And Georgia, like I think we all of us that are on the ground working put our ass on the line every election cycle, every year. I think what we have to remember is this is a midterm election, but every election cycle counts, whether it's at the municipal level, the state level, the
Mhm.
governor's race, or the congressional level. Every election to us is so vital and so important. Obviously, we are
Mhm.
very disheartened and saddened by the governor's race, as you can only imagine. But at the same time, we're still in the runoff, so the momentum has not stopped for us. We're still out there doing the thing, getting out the vote. I would say this though, Georgia has over 7 million people, registered voters, but our turnout was slightly over 2 million, right? So
Wow.
we can talk about all the numbers and showcase all the conferences that we go to, right? How much are people only concerned about voter registration numbers? I mean, this is the story that I think we need to push back. The narrative we need to say is, yes, voter registration is very important, but it's fucking transactional.
It
Sign
is.
up to vote and
Mhm.
goodbye, I'll see
Mhm.
you later. Right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
every
Mhm.
day on
Yeah.
the ground, day in, day out, organizing is still critical. If we are not talking to
Yeah.
folks daily about issues that impact their lives, issues that impact the community, nothing is ever going to change. You can't wait till you
Yeah.
receive the mailer or when we turn from voter registration to get out the vote to get people to the polls. It's too late. It has to be
Yeah.
year-round organizing and it has to be issue-based. And, I hope folks that are listening to this show understand that we can no longer win democracy if we are only basing democracy through using tools that are transactional. Voter registration should be a
Mhm.
tool we employ in organizing and not the other way around. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and Josie, I want you to answer that question as well, right? But I get I'm on an email newsletter chain or what have you for an organization. I think it's called MLK something or another. I have to find it. But either way, what I noticed they're in Tennessee and they put out an email that talked about in Shelby County, Tennessee, the early voter breakdown and the number of registered voters versus the number of people who actually voted. And, they had 588,508 people that are registered to vote in Shelby County. And the percentage of those for early vote was like 3% as the number of people who actually voted. And so,
Wow.
and I've said it over and over again that, we can do these large drives of voter registration, but there's a gap there. People
mhm.
are registered and then they don't go do it. And it's like, why don't they go do it? That's what we
Mhm.
need to figure out. Why aren't they registered or why aren't they voting when they're registered? And, is it a disconnect between candidates and people? Is it an oversaturation? Like, I don't know what's happening. But before we get into that, Josie, what did you think of the results in the races in your state? You're in Maryland.
Yeah. I mean, first, before I dig into Maryland, I just got to give it up to Leng and other organizers in Georgia. Like, that shit is hard. And I was thinking about it the other day that Georgia is basically on its fourth election this year. Like fourth, say from like election to runoff to election to runoff. Like that is hard for organizers. That's hard for voters. That's hard for the money necessary to turn out votes. Like that stuff is hard. And y'all continue to hit the pavement. And I just like I want to take a nap for y'all. So I can't even imagine how y'all actually feel. So, just thank you and kudos to you and to all the organizers there. Yeah. So, in Maryland, it was so because I'm a first time voter, it was fascinating to see outcomes of things I voted on being like, I voted for that. And it turned out the way I wanted it to. Like we legalized a marijuana and I was like, I voted for that, things like that. It was really amazing to see that part of democracy sort of like fuel your passion to make you feel like you did something that led to something. And we had pretty good outcomes. So there's some interesting parts throughout our state, that I thought was kind of interesting. We got a really, a decent governor. We got, a decent state, a federal representation. There's a couple of places where I thought some of the outcomes around the mayors and some of the other more localized races seemed counterintuitive to the issues that were winning. And I feel like I'm observing that in a lot of different places where the issue that won doesn't correspond with the elected official needed to actually implement and move those things into actuality. So it's like we win on issues and lose on the candidates that will actually then manifest the issues we just won on.
Okay, so just like anything else, we have technical difficulties sometimes, and we lost Josie for a second. Hopefully, we can get her back so we can chat a little bit more. In the meantime, Ling, I have a question for you. Like, Make It Work Nevada, we have worked on elections for a number of years, and in the past, we've done doors. We didn't do doors this year, but we've sent out mail. We did radio ads and some in-person events, conversations such as this online. But what we've also seen is that there are some other groups doing mail and radio ads and the such who are helping to create this great divide amongst, people of color, BIPOC community, however you want to describe it, but people other than the white majority. And specifically, a friend of mine sent me a mailer, a text message, a picture of this mailer that basically said that it was directed towards the AAPI community and said that, Black and Latinos are basically taking your jobs, and that the left and the Democrats, Joe Biden, whomever, that they're pushing towards that. So it didn't matter how much, experience you had or anything like that, but they only want, Black and Latinos to be hired so that there's this diversity or what have you. And so it was really off-putting, right? Like it was just, it boggled my mind to think that, this is the rhetoric that they're trying to say. When we're talking about diversity, we're not talking about one particular or two particular groups, and to try to pull one particular group away and say they're not for you, but we are. It is very off-putting. And I don't know if you saw any of that down in Georgia, but yeah, are you seeing that in any of the communities down there in Georgia?
I have not received a mail like that, but I am not surprised. I think folks have to also understand that the AAPI community is not a monolith, right? First of all, we're not all the same. We all collectively speak hundreds of languages. So if you can think, like hundred of languages, like that means there's so many different people in this whole mix of AAPI, right? But we're always lumped in together because our numbers are not big enough, so to speak, compared to other population in the country. Right? So that's number one. Number two is you also have to understand that, historically, the the Asians have been was part of colonization. I grew up in a former British colony. Many of us were part of the wars that happened. And so, and not only that, if you look at Asia as a whole, a lot of Asia was carved up, during colonization and also during the war, and we were given to other European countries as if we were just given up, right? And so the idea
like you didn't have your own autonomy.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like back during colonization, some of us, spoke Portuguese in our country. Some of us spoke English. Some of us spoke, Spanish. So it was like we were just cut up and given up, right? So the idea of a lot of it also comes with the fact that, so through colonization, a lot of Asians have also learned that the West is always better than us. Right. So and then in America, you have this whole model minority myth where, all Asians are doing great. Right. So there is also this sense of like divide even within the API community when there is classism, where there is white supremacy that is entrenched in the culture itself, that, it's not something that can be easily, how do you say, like, not all API are woke, right, so to speak. So it's like some kinfolk like some skinfolk ain't your kinfolk.
Mm.
So and also AAPIs have always been known to be the wedge that the what you call it, like the racist people in America, the white racist people, have used against us to wedge us against other communities of color, right? This is not a secret. It happens every day, right? It's just like, oh, Asians are good, all the other people of color are bad, right? So that is a strategy, and that is a tool that they have used to divide us as BIPOC communities. So I think, there's a lot that we can talk in detail over drink sometime to talk about the history and the context of where we are and how it has become like that, and how they have used us as a weapon against other communities of color. But I am not surprised
Yeah.
by what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, let's have drinks and dig into that. You know, heavy on the drinks and on, the plight of colonization and how
Oh
folks
yeah.
end up brainwashed from it. Because that's the first thing I started thinking about is like, but what about the internment camps in the United States?
Yeah.
Like, how are you saying
Imperialism.
you're on my side? But at one
Hmm.
point, they were, you took whole swaths of people and put them in the middle of the country because you thought that, that was the right thing to do. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here.
Hmm.
Like I said, we had an opportunity to also talk to a good friend of mine, Alicia Garza, who is also down in Georgia now, organizing and working alongside some really dope folks at the Black Futures Lab. And so, because of time constrictions and technology and all of that, we get a chance to listen to that part of this interview now. So here we go. Hey, everybody. I am so excited to add to this conversation a good friend and really dope activist, Alicia Garza, and we are going to dig right in. But just in case you are unaware, you're going to need to go to her website if you want the full bio. But I'm going to give you just a little bit of a rundown. I'm going to say, co-founder of Black Lives Matter movement, principal of Black Futures Lab, which is doing the Black Census in 2018 and again in 2022, which we have been a part of. I know everybody might be tired of me saying, don't forget to take the Black Census. You're taking the Black Census, and actually still that link is still live. Take the
It
Black
is.
Census.
Please take the
So
Black Census.
take the Black Census. An author of a really dope book that I have here that my husband had to remind me to not move his post-it notes because he has notes. So, and then I know there's another book hopefully coming soon. So just a person doing all of the things in all of the different places having to do with Black liberation. And I'm so appreciative that you are here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
I think it'll be great. So, honestly, let's just get right to it. Nevada barely held on to the Senate, like by the skin of our teeth, held on to the Senate. And then Georgia is going into a runoff. And a lot of races were extremely close across the country, in whether it was congressional or state Senate or what have you. I saw so many close races, and I'm just really trying to, make sense of that. Can you help us make sense of why all these races were just so close?
Well, yes, I can. So some of this has to do with the fact that traditionally during midterm elections, turnout is low. We already have a pretty low voter turnout in the United States. But in midterm elections, which are the elections between presidential elections that tend to be more high profile, you do see a lower voter turnout. But I would say, Erika, that it does tend to be the elections that Republicans really organize around. And so they see an increase in turnout from their voters, and Democrats tend to see a decrease in turnout from their voters. But what we saw in this election cycle is that people were actually energized. And so when we look at the closeness of these races, I think we should look at it from the perspective of that the Democrats did actual turnout for midterm elections and really invested resources in doing so. But even bigger than Democrats, I should say that community-based organizations, electoral organizations that are not necessarily affiliated with the Democratic Party did do a lot of work in this midterm election cycle to get out the vote, both in nonpartisan ways, but also invested in partisan races as well.
And, Make It Work Nevada is one of those organizations that we did, we sent mail, we did radio ads, some in-person events, hosted some online conversations, all of the thing. But I saw a lot online of just Facebook friends and what have you who were just overwhelmed by the amount of mail, the text messaging, the phone calls, and all of that. I wonder sometimes, even though, yes, all of these elections are extremely important, do we oversaturate? Do we get on people's nerves? Where's the line in all of that?
Well, I don't know if I think there is or should be a line, even though I do voter work, and I was really deeply irritated with how many text messages I was getting and the mail that I was getting. And I'm somebody who does electoral work, so I can only imagine for people who don't eat, sleep, and breathe politics, it might seem like overkill. But I will say this, Erika, I think it's actually indicative of a larger issue, which is that we don't have a culture around voting in this country. And so what ends up happening is that, every other year, people start getting bombarded by stuff, but they weren't being talked to in those 364 days in between. And so it feels surprising and it feels like, where is this coming from? But I think if we had more of a culture around voting in this country, and if voters were being engaged regularly between election cycles, one, we wouldn't have to bombard people with text messages and a million pieces of mail. But two, people would kind of know, right, that this is a season where we need to exercise our vote. And so even though it's annoying, right, and I think we need to figure out new ways, and many people have, right? Let me just say this. I do think that the best voter engagement programs, right, are the ones that don't rely on text and mail to communicate with people. You know that, I know that. We don't have to do so much text and mail if we're actually talking to people on the ground. Text and mail should be seen as supplements, right, to live conversations that are ongoing, that are engaging people on a regular basis about the issues they care about and who is going to be their champion in the state legislature, in the White House, in Congress, that's going to help them move their agenda forward.
And I think, and I completely agree. And it's like, duh, we should just be having conversations. People should just be funding organizations so we can have deep conversations and build these relationships year round, so that when it's time, we're just like, hey, y'all, the election's coming up. So making sure y'all got your information, when we going to go type of thing. Right. It really should be, a lot more streamlined. So, and that makes me think about the lovely Stacey Abrams and her run both times for governor of Georgia. And although right now she will not be the governor of Georgia, the amount of work that she did to shed the light on voter disenfranchisement, to really just open up and let people really understand how rotten it can be on the inside, and how things have been set up to make sure our vote does not count, or that people don't vote at all. So I first want to just be appreciative of that, even though I still would like her to be the governor. But I think about ways we can celebrate, how can we acknowledge the work that Stacey has did, and less about, she didn't win, but she has done a lot of work to help uphold democracy.
Mm-hmm. You're right, Erika. She didn't win the governor's race, but in a lot of ways, she did win other things. And I do think that one of the big ways that we can continue to push the work forward is to keep doing the work. Stacey and her team at the New Georgia Project, which is led by Nsé Ufot and others, really did a lot of work, not just to register voters, but to make sure that voters who had been left out and left behind, both current and potential voters, not only had their voting rights protected, but ensured that people were being engaged year round around the issues that they cared about. And this is something that we need to continue to do. I think it would be a shame, right, to look at Stacey's work alongside the New Georgia Project and Fair Fight and One Georgia as something that ends with the governor's race. And in fact, I'm sure those groups would tell you the same thing. They are still filing lawsuits on behalf of people who are being disenfranchised. They are still organizing people throughout the state of Georgia to be powerful in politics. And they are still challenging, right, this notion that Georgia's political landscape is all but decided. It is not. And I think we saw that on a number of levels on election night, even though Stacey did not win. And I think there are still some opportunities, right, to make sure that we push forward the vision from Fair Fight and from New Georgia Project and One Georgia and others. Brian Kemp being elected governor this year does set him up, right, for longer term career aspirations. Let's just say it that way. And if we don't like the policies that Brian Kemp espouses, if we feel that Brian Kemp actually does not reflect the majority of Georgians, which we saw in relationship to issues like abortion, then we should keep him from being able to have more power. And we can do that in this upcoming legislative cycle, but we can certainly also impact his future, right? In the White House or any other kind of higher political aspirations that he has. So there's lots of ways to move the work forward. I think we just need to stay focused and keep working the formula that we know is working.
Yeah, I think, a really good point in all that is the work is always happening, even when you're not seeing it, you're not getting text messages or mailers, or the news stations are not reporting on it. The work is happening every day, and people are constantly grinding to make sure that we are upholding democracy and that folks do have the space to voice the issues that are happening in their community so that they can be tackled. So I always want people to know when the election is over, the work is never over. It keeps going.
That's right.
And one of the things I noticed in this particular election, I felt like, and tell me if you saw this, down south, the mailers and the commercials were a lot harsher. I felt like people were just downright mean and bigoted in a way that was more, it was very transparent. It used to be a little bit more subtle. And this time it was just like, no, basically we hate y'all sort of mails, mail pieces. There was actually one mail piece that someone had sent me that basically said, and it was to the AAPI community, the Asian American community, saying that the left, Biden, whomever, that they are pushing for only Black and Latinx people to get these jobs, that, Asians and white people, need not apply for these jobs because it's not about your qualifications, it's about skin color. And so, it was jarring, the amount of bigotry that is there, but also just that deep divide that they're trying to further create within BIPOC and POC communities. And so I'm wondering, how do we as organizations combat this narrative, and how do we combat disinformation, especially since it doesn't feel like, to me, the Democratic Party is doing a really good job at doing that. And, sometimes we lack the funding to be able to, push things the way we want to. So what are your thoughts as far as ways to make sure that these seeds aren't so deeply rooted that in 2024 we're in real big trouble?
Mm-hmm. I think that you're absolutely right that the extreme faction of the Republican Party really invested this election cycle in division and chaos, right? From January 6th all the way up to...
They ruined my whole birthday. Like,
mine too, girl, mine too. It was a lot. But I do think that, like, we should be mindful that the results of that actually backfired for them, that it was not successful. And in some ways, even though I hate to see it, what I love to see, right, is them being more explicit about what they actually believe in and what they actually care about, because it gives people a real choice as to where they stand, not just in history, right, but for our futures. Are you on the side of chaos, division, and hate, or are you on the side of collaboration, compromise, right, and coordination? And I think what most people chose, and we saw this across the country, is that they're not on the side of chaos and division and hate.
Right.
With that being said, I think it tells us a lot about what we need to do moving forward to counter misinformation and disinformation. And some of it might be counterintuitive, right? Which is, I think what we tend to do on the left is we really focus on facts and figures and think that that's the thing that's going to change people's minds. What the right does is they focus on feelings and perception. They don't actually care if they're telling the truth or not. They're not invested in the numbers or the facts or the figures because they know that people aren't moved by that. And I'm not advocating that we lie. What I am saying is that we actually have to win both hearts and minds. And so too often we focus only on minds and not hearts. And hearts is actually what moves us forward. It's what gets us up out of bed every day.
Mhm.
It's what helps us make decisions about who we're connected to and who we're not. It's not our minds, right? It's our heart, and it's our connection and relationship to each other. And so I think that one of the things that we can do to counter misinformation and disinformation is to bring people closer together. If you don't know any Black people, you're highly susceptible to believing things about Black people that are not true. If you don't know anything about trans people, you're highly perceptible. If you don't know any trans people, you are highly susceptible to believing things that are not true. And one of the ways in which this country helps to foster misinformation and disinformation is through segregation and separation and isolation. That's why policies matter, right? Because when you have an unequal distribution of resources and you have people not living together, right, and learning together, it creates a lot of room for lies and untruths to proliferate. So I do think that the work that we do to build community, the work that we do to strengthen relationships between people who are often divided, is the work that's necessary to counter the lies of the extreme faction of the right.
I feel tired.
Me too.
Exhausted even,
Mhm.
not certainly far from ready to give up in any sort of way, ready for what's next. And like you said, it's time for legislative sessions. It's going to be time for the next congressional session to kick in, and there's so much work to be done around so many issues. And Make It Work Nevada being a reproductive justice organization first and foremost, which to us includes everything.
Yep.
Whether we include mass incarceration, we're talking about environmental justice, we're talking about affordable childcare and equal pay, paid family leave, things that people need in order to live their version of the American dream, whatever that might be. As you look forward into 2023 and into 2024, because it'll be time to start talking about those presidential elections, in about 6 or 7 minutes. What is your hope that we start doing now, so that when we look back on today's conversation, you're like, what, it was tiring, but I am glad that I invested my time and my energy and all of that into this work.
My big hope is that we do the work that we need to, not just to rightfully criticize the Democratic Party, but I think we need to take it over. I think what we know about the party and its infrastructure is that it's largely been left untouched by our movement. And so what that means is that people who do not share our vision or our agenda are in charge of the purse strings, and they're in charge of the agenda, and they're in charge of selecting the candidates and all of those things. And leading into 2024, if we don't like the candidates that we're getting, then it's time for us to choose those candidates. If we don't like the way that the resources are being distributed, it's time for us to really get inside that apparatus and take it over. We are the strongest majority and the most consistent majority of voters in that party. And there's no reason that we should leave it up to other people's devices what they do with our power. So that's something that I'm thinking about leading into the presidential elections. And the second thing that I would just offer here is that we already know that the party infrastructure is really highly geared toward appealing to white suburban voters who they hope to break off from both either being independent voters or being Republican voters. And that's not really a winning strategy, because those voters have shown no consistency in their relationship to the Democratic Party compared to the new American majority, who has shown consistency. And so while we know those things are going to happen, I think it makes sense for us to plan for that now. We know that as long as the party is going to appeal to white suburban voters who are fair weather friends, and sometimes no friends at all when it comes to race, when it comes to gender rights, when it comes to any of the things that we care about, then we shouldn't be shocked or surprised, right, when they make moves to throw us and our movements under the bus, trying to gather votes. So what we do to counter that, I think, is stay the course and keep focusing on the people for whom they feel that politics has nothing to offer them because they've been ignored by politics for so long. And that does include some white people, but it's not the affluent suburban voters that the Democratic Party is going after. These are the white folks in our communities who are struggling in the same ways that we are, right alongside our families, whether it be in low-wage jobs, whether it be in substandard housing, whether it be jobs that don't have access to healthcare, right? These are the folks that are our constituency to organize. And so I think we should stay focused on that and start to really show, not tell people what it is that our movement cares about. I hope that we don't get too bogged down, as we often do, in the ideological struggle that I think can hamper, right, the tangibles that are needed for people to actually get out and participate. I don't think we need to keep having struggles over what does abolition mean, or what does defund the police mean. I think it's very clear, but I think what's not clear to people is how do we get there? And those are the places where we need to actually start to focus. We need to start to focus on substance, not slogans. Right? So that means being tangible about the policy wins that we want to see, and then also lifting up the wins that we've had and tying it to people's participation. So those are the things that are on my mind leading into 2024.
And I think you bring up a good point about the tangible, in the sense of like, go big. Go big or go home. Like, one of the things that's always so disappointing to me when we do have a Democratic majority somewhere, like in Nevada at one point, where there were still baby stepped policies, and they're like, well, we'll do more next time. We'll get this, next session. But there may not be a next session, as we have seen. We had a one-term Democratic governor in Nevada, and he's gone now. And soon to be inaugurated will be a career cop that is now Republican, who is now going to be our governor. And so the things that you might have been able to do if you would have just gone ahead and, like what the song says, live like you're dying, just do the thing, because you may not get a second bite at the apple or what have you. And we really have to start thinking about how we're affecting the constituents and the folks who are in the everyday struggle. Baby steps don't help them. They'll still be in the exact same position. And that's probably the most frustrating part about doing this job for me, is trying to advocate for these policies and get people to come out and tell their stories and be engaged. And then you get like this much.
Well, that's the thing, Erika, is that because this party continues to try to capitulate to white swing voters, if there are any, then the kind of policies they propose, right, are geared towards appealing to more moderate voters. And so what that means is baby steps for our communities, right? When you're trying to appeal to people by not talking about race, by not expanding healthcare, by not doing the things that everyday people across race, across gender need, right? You're going to not only deactivate those people, but you're never going to win that population of people that you're going small to appeal to. I was saying earlier today, one day it's kente cloth and being on a knee, and the next day we can't pass criminal system reform with qualified immunity. And the next day, right, you have prominent leaders in the party saying the movement's gone too far and we've lost voters. We did not actually see that in this midterm election. And I think we have to push back against those narratives, and we have to pull out the receipts, right? So we need to have the receipts of the people who are hand wringing, and then we have to have the receipts about what actually happened. And that's going to be important to correct the record, but also to change the way that we move forward together.
I think that is completely right. So I could chat with you all day about all kinds of things, but I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate the work that you and your organizations have poured in to various communities over, more than a decade, worth of activism. And so we've got your website running below so people can find you and they can order the book. Remember also blackfutureslab.org. You can, engage with folks over there. Make It Work Nevada is always here, and as a place, an organizing home where you can come and just be yourself and let us know what's going on and let us figure out how, we can work together to change the narrative and change the world. And so I look forward to doing that from now and into the future with you. And I hope to see you soon in person, because it's been a very long time. But once again, thank you, Alicia.
Thank you for having me.
So that was great. I always enjoy talking to Alicia. I think that she has an insight from in a different point of view than a lot of folks, and is willing to say those things. I wouldn't even say a different point of view, but has the platform and the ability to say what needs to be said, without mincing words. And so I think that's really important. And so one of the questions, I had asked her around Stacey Abrams, because again, I was hoping she was going to be your governor last time.
Me too.
As
Me
well as
too.
this time. But also, even though she is not, I don't look at it as a complete failure, because she shined a light on voter disenfranchisement that I think a lot of folks don't even realize is still happening, not just in Georgia, but in a lot of other places, and not even just the South, mind you. A lot of folks think all of the racism and bad things only happen in the South, but it's widespread across, this country, and the people are always looking for ways in which to block people from voting or having a say, or even, showing up to meetings. The times that they hold, city council or county commission or whatever meetings are not great for people who work a regular 9 to 5. You don't get a chance to go and let your voice be heard at a lot of these in a lot of these municipalities. But also, even with voting, there's a lot of restrictions, voter ID laws in many places, no early voting in a lot of places. Sometimes you can't even do an absentee ballot unless you have a valid reason, to do it, and, proving that you're going to be out of the country or what have you. And so I think what Stacey was able to do was show like just how nefarious the system can be, and trying to uproot some of that. And I think she was able to do that and open a lot of eyes. But, I wanted to ask, from your point of view as a Georgia resident, and as somebody who I know was an avid supporter of Stacey Abrams, how do you feel about, what has happened?
Well, personally, very disappointed, and I mean, I had so much feelings about, the hopes and dreams I had for Stacey as a governor, even from the last cycle and now this cycle. But, the voter suppression is real, right? As I think about this election cycle and last election cycle, there were so many in between. There were so many like new bills, new laws that were put into existence to even oppress folks even further, right? And this cycle election, too, I was thinking like, some of us were talking and we're like, oh shit, you know what? All the school systems are closed. Many of the school systems are closed. So now parents have to deal with childcare if their kids are not in school. How are they going to go vote? Right? I mean, like, it's just like more and more, layers of things we're not thinking about that are coming, right? In years before, we could have what we did, we called parties to the poll. We brought food and water to folks in line waiting. We can't do that anymore, right? So there's like so many things that are always hindering people from going to vote. And most of the people that have the privilege to vote are the people that don't have to worry about those things, right? So, Stacey has done an amazing job in helping, like, really highlighting the problems that we have and really working on it. And I know this is not the end for Stacey. I know she's going to continue to fight whatever iteration of the next Stacey. I'm looking forward to it because I know this is not the end for her.
I know a lot of people want her to run for president, so
yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what's the next thing on the horizon. But I know whether Stacey is a politician or not, she continues to fight for our community. So I don't think that's ever going to go away.
And so you have a runoff coming up, and
Yes.
What is the date for the runoff?
December 6th.
December 6th. Okay. And so leading up to that, is there anything that you want to ask, the audience? Obviously, everyone is, not going to be in Georgia or a registered voter in Georgia watching this, but how can we from afar be helpful to you all?
I said, continue to donate to the campaigns, continue to donate to organizations like ours that are on the ground doing the job. Also, there is very little resources, but we are still continuing to do the work, trying to find ways to do it. So if you are from afar, not only can just praying for us, but also really like, putting money to our troops on the ground so that we can really turn out, get voters to the polls.
Okay. And then, and the website to your organization where people would be able to donate directly would be
www.9to5.org. So
okay.
925.
Yes,
Yes.
9 to 5. Like the song, it's easy to
That's
remember.
right.
Just sing about Dolly Parton, who everyone also loves.
Yes.
Well, I think, we could have a lot more conversation, and actually something Josie brought up, and I wish she was still on, was the idea around people voting for issues that matter, whether they were
That's
ballot
right.
initiatives or what have you, but not necessarily voting for candidates who would uphold those values or make sure and implement those issues into and codify them into law and
Yes.
policies that work. And so I think that, at some point I want to have a follow-up conversation about that, because I think that's a part of voter education. Sometimes when we talk about voter education, we're talking about, oh, this is where you go and vote, or this is what this seat
That's
does,
right.
but not necessarily, okay, so you believe in, the right to choose, you believe in having, abortion laws that are not restrictive and all of that, but then sometimes you vote for people who are going to try to help further restrict them. I think that we need to figure out how to better have those conversations around things that actually matter to you and the people who are actually going to be able to get those jobs done.
Absolutely.
So thank you,
Yeah.
Leng, my friend. I
Thank
can't
you,
wait to see
Erika.
you. I can't wait to see you. Thank you. And as we are talking right now, it is your birthday. So happy birthday. Thank you for taking the time, out of your day to have this conversation. And thank you for the hard work, because it's a lot of hours. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to advocate and really make sure that people have the information that they need in order for us to all live our version of the American dream, whatever that is. So I am grateful for you and your work every day, even for, folks who may not ever actually see your face, or know, all the work that you're putting in. I know what you're doing, and I know what Josie is doing. I know what Alicia is doing, all of that. And so I'm grateful to be y'all's friend. And I look forward to, helping do some more as we move into 23. And it's already time to start talking about
It's already
2024
time.
presidential elections.
That's
So
right.
we
That's
got a
right.
lot of work to do. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm always grateful to you. You know that. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yay.
Yay.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been Make It Make Sense, the midterms. Again, this is our last episode of the year. We'll be back sometime next year to talk about our next legislative session, which starts in February of 2023. And so we'll be talking about all the bills that'll be coming up, and what we need for folks to do to get engaged, and, maybe head up to Carson City or over to Grant Sawyer in Las Vegas so you can testify and make your voice heard. Regardless, I love you all. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next year. Bye.
Bye.